Welcome back and welcome to part 2 of my Bout of Books kind of wrap up. I told you in my last video that I wanted to do a kind of 7 mini reviews of the 7 books that I'd read over the 7 days of the Bout of Books readathon, and so this is that video. Don't forget to click subscribe so you don't miss out on any new videos from me, and if you enjoyed this video or read any of these books or took part in Bout of Books, please give this video a thumbs up. I would really appreciate it. So I'm going to talk through the books that I read and give my thoughts on a few of these so I don't end up doing 7 separate videos. So this video might get a little long, but obviously you can skip along to whatever book you're interested in hearing my thoughts on. So the very final book that I finished was I Woke Up Dead at the Mall by Judy Sheehan. I bought this book in August, and so I'd been looking forward to reading it for quite a while. Obviously I knew that there was going to be a sort of fantasy magical element to it, but it was actually a bit deeper than I first realised. So Sarah wakes up in the Mall of America, which was amazing to start with because she is originally from New York, but she wakes up in this Mall of America. So we have scenes set in the Mall of America, which I've been to and I can totally picture. And then we have scenes set in Manhattan as well. And she lived in the kind of Washington Square Park area, which I've been to and I can totally picture. So I love the fact that the setting for this was split between those two scenes, and the fact that as a New Yorker, she was a bit kind of disparaging and scoffing about the mall. She wakes up dead with a few other people who've also lived in the same kind of area as her in Manhattan and were also her age and were also killed rather than just having died. But it turns out that the magic and the fantasy surrounding Sarah goes back a little bit further just than her waking up and being aware of what's going on when she wakes up in this mall. So this is definitely one where, you know, you have to know that there's a little bit of fantasy and a little bit of magic going into it. The kind of world isn't difficult to understand because obviously it's set in a real place and it's set using real people. The only kind of fantasy element of it is this magic and this ability to see the living even though they're dead, and the kind of the teenagers that Sarah gets friendly with and the people who are kind of running this kind of dead section of the mall. They've all got their own kind of issues and their own abilities as well. So whilst there is a little bit of a fantasy element to this one, you know I'm not a massive fantasy fan, and so there was just enough magic in this one that I could cope with it and I enjoyed it, and it was quite an escapist read. It was more than I thought it was going to be, and so I think I enjoyed it a little bit more than I thought I was going to. But I definitely recommend this one. Even if you haven't been to these places, you'll still be able to picture them because the description and the setting's quite easy to follow. It's very much a character-driven book, so you will sort of live this book through Sarah and get friendly with her friends and kind of feel the trauma that she feels. And the murder aspect of it is really definitely kind of a secondary quality, and there are funny moments in this book as well, even though it's about death. So I really enjoyed this one and I do recommend it. So the penultimate book that I finished was Boys Don't Knit by Tom Easton. One of my favourite things about this book is that it has really short chapters. It's written in a diary form, and I haven't read a book that's written in diary form for absolutely ages, and so I loved the fact that this was written in diary form. One of my favourite books is Bridget Jones's Diary, just because it's got that diary form, and I think it makes the book just move quicker, and the fact that the chapters are so much shorter means that, you know, you go, oh, I'll just read a few chapters, and it ends up being quite a quick read. This book also is hilariously funny. It's obviously involving main characters of teenage boys, and so you get kind of their view of the world, and it's actually, you know, the things that they think and the things that they do are just hilarious. We've got our main character Ben, and he has to do some community service and some classes. I was just checking I wasn't giving any spoilers away, because he's on probation for, again, an event that's actually really quite funny. And he ends up taking this knitting class as part of the conditions of his probation, and that's why he kind of, you know, gets into knitting. But there's so much more to this. Obviously there's a bit of a love story here, obviously there are some family issues here. There are Ben's dad is just the classic dad, and I could see my dad in him so much, and there are Ben's friends think the same of their dads as well, and so it was just, yeah, it was perfect. I could really relate to it. It made me laugh. It was a quick read. It had a strong message about gender identity. There was some relationship issues in here and some ethical issues in here as well, and I really want to read the next one now. It doesn't seem to be out here in the US. I can't seem to find it in bookshops or the library, so I think I'm just going to download it on my Kindle and read that soon. Hopefully I'll get to that this month or next month, because I want to find out what happens next to Ben. And Tom's new book has just come out in the UK as well, so I might see if I can get my hands on that one as well. So then another audiobook that I listened to was Every Last Word by Tamara Islandstone. Just take a drink a moment. And this book is another one where there's a little bit of magic and a little bit to do with death again in here. I seem to have chosen a little bit of a theme to some of the audiobooks that I listened to. This book is sort of classic Tamara Islandstone. Her previous two books were to do with time travel, so again there was a little bit of magic to them there, but again not enough fantasy to kind of turn me off. It's set in a real world, there are real characters, there's just a slightly fantastical element to them. This book is to do with kind of the way that poetry and performing poetry can help people and the effect that it has on them. And I'm not somebody who can write poetry easily. I don't even enjoy teaching poetry. When it kind of comes up to that section that I've got to teach in English, it's a bit like, oh, what am I going to do with this one? And you know, if a child says to me, can I just make it an acrostic? That's fine. Yeah. I'm not very good at getting things to rhyme. I'm not very good at kind of showing emotion through poetry. I'm much more, let's write some descriptive prose. But I really got into the poetry in this one. This book also deals with a character who has OCD. And I think it's a really good representation of a character with OCD. There's so much kind of stigma surrounding OCD, and you know, people are like, oh, you know, you really like washing up, OCD. And it's like, well, no, actually, people saying that more and more just makes the stigma around OCD even worse. And, you know, we see that this character struggle with things. We see the therapy that she goes through, and we see the struggle that she has kind of telling her friends that she's got OCD, or the way the OCD kind of affects her, because I think even friends that do understand it don't understand how it affects her. And despite the fact that she does have OCD, it's not rammed down your throat throughout this book. It's dealt with really well, and there's a really good author's note at the end that talks about that a little bit. So if you do get this book, then maybe read that author's note first, because it's really interesting. Again, a little bit of romance in this. This is a young adult contemporary, just like most of the other books that I've read here. A little bit of romance. The romance is really sweet, and so that kind of helps with the fantastical element of it. You've got your kind of issues surrounding the main character, you've got that romance, and then you've got that fantasy element too. This book wasn't exactly what I was expecting. I knew, being Tamara Islandstone, there would be some fantasy to it, but I didn't realise quite what it would be, and the fantastical element or magical element doesn't become apparent until you're sort of some way into the book. But it was definitely an enjoyable read. I really enjoyed the characters, and the main character in this one has definitely stuck with me. So it's definitely another recommendation. I've been doing well for books that I really enjoy this readathon. Okay, next book I read was one I was so excited about, so you know what's coming next, and that is Noteworthy by Riley Redgate. So shiny, this book, so bright and shiny, it doesn't help that it's bright white. So this one is about a cappella, and it's also a little bit about sort of gender identity, and a bit about, you know, lying and what happens when a lie finally catches up with you. If I just read you a little bit from the back, you'll get an idea a bit more about, you know, what this one's about. The wig came easily from my hairline, the cap damp with sweat. My fingers fumbled bobby pin after bobby pin from my hair, and the locks of black cascaded around my face, rippled with a curl. The computer bloomed into light. I threw a flurry of clicks and typing its way and bit down hard on my cheek. One new message in Julian Zhang's otherwise empty inbox. Audition results. Read the subject line. I tapped it. Dear Julian, thank you for coming to auditions today. We'd like to invite you back for a call back tomorrow evening in the practice rooms underneath the Prince Music Library, room 003, 7:30 sharp. Best, the sharpshooters. The tightly wound clockwork in my chest spun loose, bells and whistles and noise clamoured in my chest, but all around me was silence. The world saw exactly what I wanted to see. Finally, it wanted to see me. So we've got the a cappella aspect of this group, and we also have Jordan/Julian trying to make it as a male a cappella singer when she's really a female, and what happens when people begin to discover her secrets. This book is set in an American boarding school for the arts. Jordan's actually from San Francisco, but the boarding school is up in New York State, and so we have that aspect of being separated from her family. The other 7 members of the a cappella group all have sort of issues going on as well, and so we get to hear a little bit of their story. And it was interesting seeing the different pressures that parents and teachers and students themselves put on each other at this school for the arts, because that's definitely a big aspect of the book as well. This book was definitely a fast-paced read. You know, you're left hanging at the end of every chapter, wanting to find out what happens with Jordan. Is his lie going to unravel? Her lie going to unravel? Julian's lie going to unravel? It's very confusing. You know, is she going to be a success? What's going to happen with her family? What's going to happen with her studies? What's going to happen relationship-wise? This is definitely a book with diverse characters, and I really like that. And I just loved the kind of musical and musical theatre aspect of this one, and it definitely made me want to go and join an a cappella group right away. It was such a fun read. I laughed, I thought, I was tense. It was just everything that I wanted it to be. And again, it's a YA contemporary, and I really enjoyed it. Quick read, fun read, great read. Okay, taking a step to a slightly different genre now is a book that I'd wanted to read for absolutely ages, and I knew it was going to be quite a tough read, but I didn't expect this read to be as absorbing as it was, and that's Asking for It by Louise O'Neill. This book is Louise is an Irish author, and this book was published in Ireland first, and then it just kind of the popularity just blew up because it asks all these questions about, you know, what is consent and what does no mean, and what other things mean no, and you know, our young girls asking for it, and it's obviously it's a story about a girl who, you know, is a victim of rape and is a victim of images of her being put on the internet without her consent. Again, I want to check there's no spoilers in here. So Emma O'Donovan is 18. Beautiful and fearless. It's the beginning of summer in a quiet Irish town, and tonight she and her friends have dressed to impress. Everyone is at the big party. All eyes are on Emma. The next morning, Emma's parents discover her in a heap on the doorstep of their home, unconscious. She is dishevelled, bleeding and disorientated, looking as if she has been dumped there in a hurry. She remembers nothing from the party. That day, several devastating photos from the party are posted online and go viral, eventually launching a criminal investigation and sending the community into tumult. The media descends, neighbours choose sides, and people from all over the world talk about her story. Emma's life has been changed forever by the unthinkable and all too common act of sexual violence, and all she wants to do is disappear. And there's so many aspects of this that I hadn't considered that, you know, this writer brings up. You know, we get to see the night before, we get to see the night of, we get to see the morning after, and we get to see a year later. And, you know, the things you don't think about are, you know, how people's mindsets change from one time to the next to the next. You also don't think about the fact that, you know, people who are close to you and who love you might not believe you. And the kind of the effect that has on the whole family, not just on the girl herself. Emma's doing her exams, and, you know, it talks about how it affects her. We also get to see, you know, how it's perceived in the media through various like hashtags and news articles, and the way her parents handle Emma's viewing of those hashtags and news articles, and the pressure that Emma is under whether to prosecute these boys that did this to her or not. And so this is just, it is an intense read. I was, you know, up late reading this because I was so absorbed into it, and I was reading it and, you know, saying things out loud. My husband was like, what's wrong? I'm like, it's just this book. It was completely absorbing read. Like I say, it brought up things that I really hadn't thought about. Emma as a character is kind of difficult to like in some ways, because she's kind of that popular girl who, you know, you didn't necessarily get along with at school, or that popular girl who maybe bullied you, and yet you have this like sympathy and this empathy with her, and, you know, you might find yourself picking sides, you might find yourself looking at other characters in the book in different ways. And yeah, this book has an interesting development and an interesting ending. And yeah, like I say, Emma's quite hard to like, but I still could not put this book down. I think it's an important read, and I think I would recommend reading it. Obviously, if things like this, if things like rape and, you know, sexual consent are a trigger warning, then, you know, obviously don't read this. But I think it is, you know, it's a really good read. It's amazingly well written, and yeah, definitely something I kind of wasn't expecting, but I'm really glad I read it, and completely absorbing. That changed the tone a little bit. Let's go for my next read, which was a listen, and again deals with some issues surrounding death, and that is Falling Into Place by Amy Zhang. So I just got to move a little bit there. Been sitting for too long. This book, again, has been on my shelf for a while now. I was sent this book from the publisher for a review, and I just didn't ever manage to fit it into my reading time. And this is to do with, again, a teenage girl. It's a young adult read again, and she decides that she wants to take her own life, but then we hear from her family and her friends and what they think about it. Again, Liz Emerson is a character who is the popular girl who you didn't necessarily get along with. She bullied you, or she, you know, made snarky comments, or she took your friends. And so she's a character, again, quite hard to get on with, but the story was definitely absorbing. It wasn't exactly what I expected it to be, and some of the characters that come out of the woodwork and turn out to be friends or not friends of Liz Emerson's are quite interesting. It was really interesting reading about how the dynamic changes when the accident happens, and how, you know, her family changes as well. it's really quite hard to talk about this one without giving too many spoilers. It was darker than I expected it to be. Obviously I knew it was about death, and I knew it was about kind of attempted suicide or suicide, you know, however the ending turns out. But the yeah, it was definitely darker than I thought it was going to be, and it was more about the characters surrounding this girl than the girl herself, and how, yeah, social hierarchies can change, and that kind of thing. It was quite a quick read. It was an interesting read, and definitely one if you're into reading about high school dynamics. But yeah, it wasn't my favourite read of the week, but I'm glad that I've read it now, and I did finish it and I did enjoy it. So there you go. And my very first read of the week was a lovely, sweet, romantic read with, again, a bit more stuff to make you think than you first realise when you pick this book up. And that is How to Make Out by Brianna Shrum. This book, oh, it was just fantastic. I just so enjoyed it. It was everything I wanted it to be, and then some. We have got, let me read a little bit of the blurb. These blurbs are, you know, here to make you buy the book, so why would me putting it into words make it any better? 16-year-old Renly needs $3,000 for the maths club's trip to New York City and knows exactly how to get it. She's going to start a blog where people pay for answers to life's questions from a certified expert. The only problems are, 1, she doesn't know how to do anything but long division and calculus, and 2, she's totally invisible to people at school, and not in a cool gossip girl kind of way. So she decides to learn to do, well, everything. As the blog's reputation skyrockets, so does the new and improved Renly's popularity. She has nabbed not only the attention of the entire school, but also the eye of Seth Levine, the hot culinary wizard she's admired from across the home ec classroom all year. So we've got Renly's blog, and we've got Renly's kind of budding relationships with 2 possible suitors, and then we also have Renly's friendship with her friend April and her friendship with the maths club. And what we kind of see is the classic thing of, you know, you can't do everything, and somebody trying to juggle every aspect of their life and kind of other aspects of their life missing out because of it. I found Renly to be an incredibly relatable character, and I liked listening to the story alongside her and living the story through her. There are points where I didn't necessarily agree with the decisions that she made, and there are points where I did agree with decisions that she made, but she is just like you and me. She's not perfect. She doesn't know how to do everything, and that's what really kind of I enjoyed about the book. It's very much Renly coming of age and Renly growing up and Renly understanding how to make more adult decisions. There is Renly's next door neighbour Drew, who I just absolutely fell in love with. You know, I would quite happily go and move in with Drew. That's absolutely fine. He is very sort of smouldering and bad boy, and I really enjoyed him. I loved main best friend April. She's fantastic. Again, she's really into maths too, but she's got this kind of alternative look with kind of piercings and coloured hair, and you know, I'm the maths teacher with the coloured hair, so I really identified with April. And then I enjoyed watching Renly's kind of developing relationship with her possible suitors. I also enjoyed the blog aspect of it, obviously, you know, having a blog myself and a YouTube channel and kind of seeing that grow and seeing what things work and don't work. And I think it's great to have a book about a blogger that, you know, doesn't necessarily go wrong. It's a successful blog, and you know, a teenager growing up and having to deal with some issues that she didn't have to deal with as a child. There are some really sweet scenes in this one, and there are some difficult scenes as well, but I loved every minute of it. I love this book so much more than I thought I was going to. As I say, Renly, so relatable, so easy to read about. And yeah, I really recommend this book. It was so much fun. Definitely seek it out. And it was a quick read as well. I read it all in one day. So definitely one for the summer reading list. And there you have it. As I say, thank you for sticking with me if you've watched the whole video. If you skipped through to the book reviews that you want to, but you've made it through to the end, then well done. That's great. Please do subscribe and you'll get notified of new videos from me. I will have another video up for you soon. I've got some tags and some book talks coming up, and if you did enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up. I hope that this was kind of a different way to review these books and a different way to talk about a readathon wrap up, something I'm trying out. So leave me a comment below with your thoughts, whether this worked or not. And obviously if you've read any of these books, give me a comment and let me know what you thought of them, whether you sort of shared my opinions. And I will see you in my next video. Bye.